Okay, the tape is rolling, so let's get going. First off, has anyone else finished the program on their own since we met on Tuesday? Like finished? I'm looking at you, Minor. No? Okay. Okay.
I would be done, but I think I'm making it way too complex.
Okay, Braden is fired. No, just kidding. Yeah, so last time we met, we went through all of the requirements for user input, right? And I think we did a pretty good job. We did some validation. So all of the bullet points under collect data from a user, we did. If you missed that, please feel free to see the YouTube video on the wiki right here, 326. Okay, so today I would like to, we should be able to tackle this and hopefully get into calculating a balance, right? So let's do some file stuff. Anybody have any questions before we begin? We will use some of John's files. Yeah, John, if you would get us a couple test files, like I know you posted the generator, but could you just post some files to the Teams repo there? Okay, we created all these functions on Tuesday, get valid number from user, blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to write a comment right here saying get inputs from user. This is essentially mapping to number 1 in our requirements. So now I'm going to map something for number 2. Get data. Is it data or data?
Data.
Okay. Get data from file. So what are the rough steps that we need to do here, right? We know we're going to have a test file that exists somewhere that has data like what we can see right here, right? A couple pieces of data on every line in the file. So what are the steps we need to take? If I asked you to do a defining table for number 2, what would that look like? Step number 1, for example. What's the very first thing you would need to do to get this data from a file? You need the path to the file. Okay. Yeah. I don't think we should make the user input this. Maybe we want to make the user input this. I don't know. Gentlemen who have the program finished, did you have a path hard-coded in your application, or did you ask the user for a path? Okay. I think that's fine. Braden nods his head in approval. So let's proceed.
Thank you.
No. So very first thing we need to open a file at a path. So let's create a function to do this. For now, let's just make this function void. I'm going to call it get data from file. Any inputs we need here? Did we ask the user for a file path and we need to tell this function what the file path is? No, Ben. No, we didn't. All right, so let's create a variable for the path. First off, remember our discussion on relative paths versus absolute paths. I would like it if we didn't have to type out a great big relative or absolute path. So I'm going to create, I think I already have a file in here. If I don't, I'm about to. Documents, hello, hello. All right, right inside of here, I'm going to create a new text file, and I'm going to call it data.txt. And then I'm going to go to the wiki. I'm going to get all the data. I'm trying to get Shelly riled up here. It's not working.
Data? Yeah, okay.
Datas.
You can call it data.
The database. Do that. Save. Okay, now that that text file exists in the same folder as my program, I don't need to give path information. I just need to give the file name. And as we all know, the file name is called Say that right there. It's data. Okay.
Is it chopper?
Get to the chopper. All right, we've got the file name. We know we don't need to provide a path because we are in the same folder. So now we need to crack this file open and read some lines of text in. So what does that code look like? Anybody? Anybody? Brand new plastic spoon for anyone who can answer my question.
So tempting.
There was file read all lines and file read all text. What do you think we need to do? Anybody remember the difference?
So read all lines is going to give you an array of everything that's in there.
Okay.
And then read all text will give you one big text string.
What did you use, John?
To write to or
Read. Read.
I did read all lines.
Okay. I'd like to tell you right now that that was the right decision.
I sure hope so because
All right. So we're going to create a string array, right? And this will be, we'll just call it file contents. We will say file dot read all lines.
I've got a file in right now called our event test file. In case you want it.
I do. Okay, we're going to Teams for John's test file on the Files tab. And then there is Events Test File. So I want to download. And who knows where it downloads? Oh, downloaded. Just had to wait for the prompt. Someone remind me next time to wait for the prompt. Event test data. There we are, event test file. Okay, I'm going to put this again in our file so I don't have to give it path information. Come back here and change my application to read from that file. Event test file.txt. Thank you, John. I'm sure you're about to rickroll me with that file, but bring it on. Okay, remember that file.readAllLines will give us an array, a string array with one element for every line in the file. Right? So how many elements should be in my array if there are 5 years worth of data with one line for every month? The answer is 60. I'm way better at math than you all. This is what I feel like all the time. Okay. Just teasing. Don't be so sensitive. Okay, we have now written a function to crack open a file and read the data. I think that should be probably about it for this function, right? So let's return the data. And here we go on to an error. Why is Visual Studio about to yell at me? Why are you yelling at me, Visual Studio? Since program hello.getData from file returns void, a return keyword must not be followed by an object expression. So what do we need to return instead? A string array of data. Okay, very good. Let's call this function. I am now transformed into Smart Keyboard. Someone help me call this function and get this data right here into this function. I'm looking for someone without glasses. Sit down, Eric. Sit down. Come on. Austin, what do I need to do to call this function? Oh. I just want to call this function and I want to store the data here in a variable. I'll give you the variable. How about that? String data. Is-
Data from file.
Perfect. Okay, I've loaded up the data from the file, so now we've got a couple more steps here to really understand the data. As you know, the data is in this format, so 60 lines, but on every line, we've got a couple different pieces of data, right? So we've got the year is the first thing before the comma. Then after that comma, we've got the month. So you can see we've got an event in here for January of 2019, or February of 2019, and so forth. We've got an event likelihood score, which means when we do the calculation, if the likelihood that we calculate is greater than or equal to the likelihood of the event is going to occur, right? If the event occurs, there's an amount of money that should be deducted or added to our HSA, and we need a description for that event. So what do we got? 5 pieces of data on this line. So we've got 60 rows with 5 pieces of data. How many pieces of data is that? That's 300. Again, math. So we probably need to do something to break apart each line of data so that I can use it. So let's write a function to do that. What would you like to call this function? It's going to take in a string. The string will be one line from a file like we just were looking at on the wiki. And the output should be probably a string array, right? That contains all of the data from the file, from the line of the file, as separate elements. What would you call this? Parse file? I like it. I'm going to make it void for now. Parse file. I'm going to say parse file line. And let's take in a string file line. And what should this return? What do you think? We're taking in a line from the file, and we should be returning several pieces of data. 5 data points, that's right. So what should our return type for this function be? Someone? Integer? Let's go with it. All right, here we go. So we've got a line in the file, and we need to break it apart. So I think you'll recall there is a way to take a string and split it apart based on a character, right? So and that will return us an array. So I'm going to create a string array called line data and say string dot split. Nope. I'm going to say file line dot split. And split wants to know what character it should split on, right? So I think we should split on the comma.
Are they all split by commas?
Let's take a look. The answer is yes.
So the negative's not a, okay, that's just a.
We could split on the negative sign, and if we did that, we'd get one string containing 2019, comma 1, comma 5, comma, and then we'd get another string containing 100, comma broken arm, comma. But you can split on any character, right? We could split on A. Although if you have A as your file delimiter, then you're in trouble, buddy. Okay. I think instead of int, we should be returning the string array that we just split up, right? Because this is where all of our pieces of data are.
We should get rid of that assignment and just say return file dot split.
Interesting proposition.
That way you don't have to add it. Right.
What do you think? The answer is yes. And we created this as a separate function, even though it's got one line of code, because maybe we add validation in here later to say, are there exactly 5 pieces of data in this array? And if not, blow up. I don't know. Okay. Very good. So we've got a collection of file lines and we've got a thing to split a file line. So we need to go through and probably use that function to split each file line. Okay. I would say at this point we have accomplished everything in number 2. Right? We have read in the file. We've put it into a state where it's all split up. We'll have some conversion to do later on in interpretation, but I think we are ready to calculate the balance. Does anyone have any question about the work that we've accomplished today so far in these 15 minutes? I would just like to give a shout out to the person who wrote these requirements. They're very clear. They're helping us so much. So thank you, whoever did that. It was me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, let's do some calculations. So remember, when we're calculating, we need to do the calculation how many times? 60 times, right? So we're going to do it for every line in the file, right? This probably isn't exactly accurate, the current month, because right now our file has an entry for January 1st of 2019 or January 2019. That's not the current month. So I'm going to change this up a little bit, and I hopefully you guys did that too. You didn't go from current month, you based it off of months in the file. Okay.
I just ignored the month and year.
Just ignored the month and year. Understood. You will pay for this.
I wanted to plan for a file that didn't have, all the months all in a row. Just laid out.
Okay.
Anyway.
I'm now very curious about your file that you've passed me. It has everything I would expect, and I'm no longer curious. Okay. We're going to do 60 rounds of calculation. So when we're going to repeat something 60 times, the tool that we would use would be?
Copy and paste.
For those listening, that was the wrong answer. We're going to use a loop. Okay, let's write a loop very first. I'm going to say for each string line in data, do some stuff, right? Remember, a for each is really made to use with collections. We're saying take the data collection, which is an array of strings, and starting from element 0 on down until the end of that collection, pull out strings from that string array one by one and do stuff to it, okay? So we're going to start with the very first month, and I think a fine thing to do here would be to get the separated data. Line data, and we can call our function here parse file line. Okay, now we've got a collection here that is not, how many items should be in this collection at this point? 5. Very good, because we split apart one line into a collection of strings. One line contains 5 strings. Okay? I lost, there we go. Here we are. Okay. So the calculation says we need to do several things. I forget what they are. Who wrote these requirements? Okay, very first, we need to add an amount to the HSA based on the employee savings level. Okay, so we probably need a function to do something with employee savings level. Okay, so let's create a function here to calculate the employee, what do we call it? Okay. So what do you want to call this function and what should it return? It takes in some inputs, basically what the user said about their savings level, and it returns a money amount. So what do we want to, what should the return type be?
Because it's money.
So usually when you deal with money, Lillian's right, we could do a decimal, but it just so happens all of our amounts right now are whole numbers, so I think an int would be fine. Although if this were a real financial application, that would not be fine, right?
Use double or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, could do that. Yep. For now, let's do int because we are not dealing with change. We're above that. I talked to a guy who works here at Health Equity, and he told me that because he uses electronic payments so often, when he gets change, it's inconvenient enough for him that he just throws away his change. It's just appalled. Just appalled. I think you do. It was you. No, it wasn't you. Okay. So let's say calculate employee contribution amount. Okay, what are some inputs for this function? What do we need to know in order to calculate the employee contribution amount? You remember we asked them for their dedication to savings. So probably that. And if we look back at these fantastic, very detailed requirements, it also says that we should double the amount that we calculate if the user is married. So we probably need both of those pieces of data. Is the user married? And what's their savings level? So I'm going to, let's see, the savings level came to us as a number. So I'm going to say int savings level and a string is married. Okay. So the requirements here tell us that we need to take their savings level score, multiply it by 150, and if they're married, double it. So let's write the equation for employee contribution amount. Someone help me. Help me out now. I will give you this. Int contribution amount starts out at 0. Then what?
So don't you need, you got is married, okay. Can you bigify that just a little bit?
You're supposed to remind me about that before
I
class.
walked in.
You done good. I was zoomed in somewhat, but anyway, not enough. Okay, what do we need to do next? There are a couple steps to calculating the employee contribution level. Take their savings score, multiply it by 150, and if they're married, double the amount we calculated. So let's write some code for that, okay?
So you need contribution amount plus the and then savings level times 150.
Me gusta.
And put a savings level at times 150 parentheses.
Okay.
And then times it by the married.
Oh no.
Hang on.
I lost my there we go. Why do we even have a page down button? Does anyone use it? Stop it. Okay, I've put these in parentheses.
And then, well, so we need to know if they're married or not.
And that needs to be converted to a, or do we just, if it's false, we times it by 0, and if it's true, we times it by 1.
Or actually, let's just get that, and then on the next line, we just say if is married.
Ah.
It's a string right now, so we'll have to say if it's equal to yes. Is this the best way to compare strings?
Then
No, because they have to actually put Y4S and all lowercase. They couldn't be yeah or upper yes.
Okay, you remember we do have validation though that says if you didn't enter yes or no, we're going to keep asking you. So we can assume that they typed yes or no based on this function. But what I was driving at is I did a double equal sign, which is not a case sensitive it is a case sensitive comparison. So if they typed capital N-O, then we'd be like, oh man, I don't know what you're even saying. Okay, here we've determined that they are married.
So written out is not case sensitive?
Equals written out with this option. String comparison dot ordinal ignore case. There are lots of scenarios where you would want to ignore the case of a string that you're comparing. There are also lots of scenarios where you would not want to ignore case, like when you're typing in your password. A capital P is very different from a lowercase p, right? But when we're seeing if they typed yes or no, we should probably do a case insensitive comparison. All right, we've determined that they're married, so we need to do a thing. I could do that. That would be very astute of me. Great job, me. Okay. And finally, the function is yelling at us and saying not all code paths return a value, so it's the very last thing we need in this function. Muy good. Contribution amount is...
We don't need the parentheses, by the way.
Okay. I will now be able to rest tonight. Thank you. John was probably saying that because there is a thing that we didn't learn about here in class called a ternary operator. We could write all of this code in one line by doing this. And parentheses around here. So this is fancy syntax for this. It's basically an if-else statement, okay? We're saying if this condition is true, use this value, otherwise use this value. And that's what the question mark and the colon mean. Yeah. And we didn't learn these on purpose just because it's, you know, you need to master if statements and else statements before you do things like this, but also this is one line of code versus 4. So, and when you get lazy, you only want to do one line of code.
Isn't it easier to read out, though, the other way?
This is definitely easier to read out, yeah. Unless you are unless like you can really understand code fast because you've been doing it for a long time. So someone who is an experienced developer might come in here and be like, I'm rewriting this very naive code. Because this whole function that is 31, 49 lines could be 1. But it just depends on your audience. So, okay, we have done that step, except for we have not gotten we have not called the function. So someone, let's do that. Let's say int contribution amount is equal to calculate employee contribution amount, and we need to pass in the savings level and whether they're married or not. Oh man, what did we do? Are you married? Rename that right now. Okay, very good. We need to do the same thing now, except it should be for the employer contribution amount. Okay, it's a very similar calculation. The employer's benefit level, time is 150, and if the user is married, we need to double it. Okay, let's write this function. Right, yeah. I'm going to start, this is a bad sign, I'm going to start by copying and pasting this function. And I'm going to say calculate employer contribution amount. And I'm going to rename this benefits level. And then I'm going to do that. And that is it for this function. So good thing or bad thing? I had a function that was almost exactly what I needed. I could copy and paste it. I did copy and paste it and changed 4 things. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing? Anybody want to argue the good thing side against Sir John? I will. It's a good thing.
Yeah. a good thing because you.
It was very easy. I could, yeah. There you go. Why is it a bad thing, John? Obviously, it's a bad thing, but go ahead.
Well, just because you don't want to, you want methods to, you want to be calling methods for large amounts of code rather than just doing the large amounts of code multiple times.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Like Braden pointed out last time, he said, well, what if the contribution amount goes to 200? Right? Now I have two places where I need to go and make that change. And if I only make it in one place because I don't know, I made it in one place and thought that was it, then I've got a bug in my code, right? This is called a maintenance nightmare, right? So I think that we can combine these two functions to do the same thing, just like we did with get valid number, right? We can reuse some code here, which really is the purpose of functions. In order to do that, I'm just going to say calculate contribution amount.
And then up above, where we're putting all these functions, where we're calling them, that's where you would input the numbers like we did before with 1 and 5. And we're just changing the numbers to a variable.
Yep. So I've made this generic. It doesn't have to do with employer contributions or employee contributions now. I've said calculate contribution amount. This is a tier, and we know that the benefits level and the savings dedication level can map to a tier because the calculation is the same. Is married is the same between both functions. So we just take their tier, we multiply by 150, add it to the contribution amount, and then if they're married, we double it. So now that this is in a generic state, a generic name, we can use it for both employee and employer contributions. Okay, I can do this again now. Contribution amount plus equal calculate contribution amount, and now instead of passing in the savings level, I can pass in benefits level and is married again. Voila, code reuse. So good. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, let's keep chugging. Next, we need to calculate so that is our contribution amount, right? You'll recall that later on we need to display a message describing the total amount added to the HSA over the 5 years. So we need to measure all of the contributions regardless of what money we took out. So let's add that real quick. Before this loop that's going to loop us through all 60 months, I'm going to add a variable int total contribution amount. I'm going to start that out as 0. And after I've calculated the contribution amount, the employer amount, and the employee amount, I'm going to say total contribution amount plus equals contribution amount, right? I'm storing this for later. Okay, now we need to calculate likelihood. So this is going to be a bear, just a bear. I'm not even going to start doing that till next time. Remember this little lovely bullet point, calculate the likelihood of an event for the given month, see the likelihood algorithm description below. And this is all the stuff that we need to do to calculate likelihood. So all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a shell of a function. I'm going to say static int get likelihood score. This returns an int. I'm going to make it return 0, so nothing will ever happen. And then I can come back to likelihood later, right? I've got the thing that will allow me to proceed developing. Eric could come behind me later and write this likelihood score function, and I can continue developing now that I have a thing that will just give me a likelihood score.
Is that common?
I would say so.
With teams.
Yep. Okay. I have gracefully just bypassed a whole lot of work. I'm gonna dump it on somebody else, and I can now compare the likelihood score of the event for the month. And if the calculated score is less than the event score, I'm not going to do anything. If the calculated score is greater than or equal to the event score, then I need to deduct an amount from the HSA. So I'm going to do those last bullet points, okay? I'm going to add it, yeah. Usually, our test files right now, they're always negative amounts, right? But yeah, there could be an event that's 100% likely that's you got hired by Health Equity who pre-funds your HSA to the max. Here's $6,000, right? Okay. Very first, in order, so we've got one side of the calculation here, likelihood, right? This is the calculated likelihood based on all of the inputs that the user gave us, but we need to pull out the likelihood score from the file. So let's do that. I'm going to call this what's a good name for this? Event likelihood. Am I spelling likelihood right? Someone? Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay. Thank you. How can I go? I've got the line data right here. I need to get something out of line data and store it as a number. It's a string right now as the likelihood of the event. So what can I do right here? I don't think I need a function. I think there's one line of code that can do this for me.
Line data and then just in square brackets, give it the index of the thing you want. So it's probably like 3, maybe.
Yeah, so if this is the contents of my line data array, what is the index of the likelihood score? We've got a 3. We've got a 2.
Is it because it's broke, or the different spaces because they're broken up by the comma?
That's right. When we said split up that string into an array, we said split on the comma.
Each section. One would be the year, 2
Yeah.
would be the day, or the month, 3 would be the likelihood score.
Okay.
So 3.
So we've got another vote for 3. Anyone else want to weigh in? We've got a 2.
Oh, you're right, so 2.
Wow, Eric. Thanks for stealing my thunder there. Oh. Yes. Indexes are 0 based.
3 equals 2.
So the thing in the third position is at index 2. Because when counting indexes, we start by counting 0. It's really backwards. I mean, every semester I've taught, every C# class I've ever taught, this is something that people hang up on because as humans, we don't count 0, 1, 2, what computers do. So
if you wanted the year, it would be 0 or would it be null?
it would be 0. The thing at position 0, or the very first item in the array. All right.
Would be no position.
That's right. Okay, we need to convert it to a number. Very good. Very, 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 very good. Okay, now we can do our comparison. We decided that the requirements told us if the calculated score is less than the event score, we do nothing. Let's write an if statement for that. What does that look like? I'm just going to call this calculated. So it's a little more specific.
So calculated score is less than, because if the number is equal to, then the event happens, right?
That's right.
So less than the event likelihood.
Mm-hmm. All right, if it's less than, then what do we need to do? Nothing. This is probably not the if statement that we want, right? Because we don't want to write an if statement just so that we can have an else block. Probably the statement we want just like that. So in this case, we need to do some deduction. Or, as an architect here at Health Equity would say, some deducing.
I wonder what architect would say that. I wonder what mid the architect would say that.
It wasn't me.
A good one.
A good one. There you go. All right. So we've determined that the event occurred, right? What needs to happen next? Add the event amount from the HSA. What does that even mean?
That's that third spot for 100. Right?
Who wrote these requirements? That's exactly right.
Two from the HSA?
So we need, does it say two from now?
Yes, it says two.
I hate myself. Two. What are you doing, Teams? Clearly it was Teams' fault. Add the event amount to the HSA. Ah. All right, let's do it. First off, let's pull out the event amount. What do we need to do? It's going to be a number. What do we need to do? The amount is stored in the parsed file array. So it's number 3.
No, third position.
Third position? Third position. Yike that. Okay. Now we know the amount, so I think we can
Return that event amount.
return it. We are in the main function, so if we have a return right now, that ends the program.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we were working in another function, that would be an appropriate thing to do. So a thing we need to do at the end of the program is we need to say, display a message describing the total amount deduced from the HSA from the HSA. So I think it's probably appropriate to start getting a running total of deductions. Right, so this is our running total variable. What we don't have yet is a total for the month, right? Or like a running total. So we probably need that as well. So at this point, I could also say running total plus equal contribution amount. I should also say running total plus equal event amount, right? So we could possibly in a month add some money, or we could add a negative number, which is subtraction. Okay. Getting pretty close on this. Just know that for every month, we also need to do these things. Well, does anyone have any questions first before we move on? Any questions about code that we've written or about just life in general?
So in the current form you have it, would that presume that the amount is always going to be a deduction?
No. So if I add a positive number, I am doing addition. If I add a negative number, I am going to be doing subtraction.
But if you're adding a positive amount, won't your deduction amount be total deduction amount be zero?
Yes, good call. Yeah.
Wait, what were you just asking? Sorry.
He's saying the total deduction amount right here is going to be a running total of the deductions, right? So if over 5 years we deducted $1,000 or whatever, we are actually storing that as negative 1,000, right? Which isn't probably a good practice, right? We're saying we deducted an amount, so it doesn't need to be negative at that point. So probably when we format the message, we could Oh, I see what you're saying. No, that's not what you're saying. You're saying the event could actually be something where we
Right. You get
add
a
money.
it's going to add money to
Mhm.
the deduction.
Okay.
So it's not really a deduction total, it's just really
All right, we have a new assumption. No, so there's bad events. We have only been dealing with bad events, right? The events that reduce our HSA amount. But what Michael is saying is there could be a positive event in a file. That certainly could happen. And right now we are taking positive events and adding them to the total deduction amount. So we're going to live with that bug for now. We're going to do every programmer's favorite thing and put in a to-do. This could be a positive amount and not and should not be added to deductions.
I think the way I handled this was I included positive deductions to the contribution. Anyway, I handled that.
Sorry, mom's texting me.
Hi, Mom.
Okay. Almost out of time. Actually, I think we'll probably stop right here for now. Okay, we won't. We'll go. We'll do this last one. For every month, display a message describing the total amount added to the HSA from employee contributions, employer contributions, and events that have a positive balance. And then display a message describing the total amount deducted from the HSA. And display a message that shows the description for any event that occurred during the month. So there are 3 messages that we need to display every month, right? Let's do those and then we'll end. And we're going to take this to-do out because we obviously need to take care of this right now. Okay. So what's the logic here? If I have an event that has a score that is positive, what should happen? It should be added to my running total, right? And it should be added to my contributions, right? If I have an amount that's negative, it should be added to my running total, but it should be added to my deductions. Okay? I think that's easy enough to do right now. Right here where we have the event amount, we can say if event amount is greater than 0. What if it's 0? What is that?
It can be added to the deduction.
That's fine. Okay. Okay. Do I need an else if here or an else?
You're only adding or subtracting, so just else, right?
Yep. And here is where I need to do the deduction or deducing. So if it's a positive amount, we're going to add to contributions. If it's not a positive amount or 0, we're going to add it to deductions. Okay?
Don't we have to use, is in 32, does it deal with negative numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
There is a data type called uint, which means unsigned int, which does not handle negative numbers.
I don't know why you use that.
Well, because you can store a bigger int in it.
Because
Yeah.
you go
Mhm.
more farther,
Mhm.
plus
Positive.
The range of numbers is all positive.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then Gandhi looks you.
What's that?
And then Gandhi one or two.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay, let's look back at our requirements. So we need to display a message describing the total amount added to the HSA from employee contributions, employer contributions, and events that have a positive balance. So for a given month, we need to know that total. We don't have anything like that just yet, right? Inside of the loop. Well, actually, we do. We have a contribution amount, right? So actually, right here, we also need to add to the contribution amount. And I think we're going to end up getting rid of this line right here because we are now adding to the total contribution amount twice. I think we should just add to it once to make this algorithm a little easier to read. And we should not do it inside of this if statement because that would be a bug. There we go. What we don't have is a running total for the month's deductions. We only have the running total for all 5 years deductions, so we should probably create a variable to track that. I'm going to create that variable right up here. So when we detect that there's a deduction amount, we're going to do that right here. And then we can also move this line. Okay, that was a lot of rapid fire moving around. But now we have the deduction amount. This is the month, the contribution amount for the month. We also have the total deduction amount, which is the running total. And we have the total contribution amount, which is the running total. Okay, we have the total contribution amount, which is the running total of contributions. We have the total deduction amount, which is the running total of deductions. We have the contribution amount, which is the monthly total of contributions. And we have the deduction amount that is the monthly total of deductions.
We're keeping two different numbers because at the end, we're just going to say, now take the contribution amount and subtract the deduction amount, and then that's your final balance.
That's right.
Rather than just doing it as it goes.
I mean, we could do that.
But yeah, then if you wanted to look at what was actually deducted versus what was added, you wouldn't be able to look at the difference.
Yeah.
You just see a number.
Moving this out of our if block here as well. So we've got monthly amounts, right? Deduction amount is a monthly amount, contribution amount is the monthly amount, and then we've got 3 running totals. We've got the contributions running total, the deductions running total, and the running total. So now I should be able to produce these messages. The messages are thus. We want to display messages describing how much was added each month, how much was subtracted each month, and the description of any event for the month. Okay, let's create those messages. Okay, are there people gathering? There aren't. Okay, we will create the messages next time.